The night sky over the ancient expanse of the Middle East is tearing apart, illuminated not by the gentle light of the moon, but by the jagged, violent streaks of ballistic missiles and the blinding flashes of military strikes. The earth, ancient and heavy with the blood of countless empires, is trembling once more under the boots of armies and the deafening roar of modern warfare. In the streets, cities are choking on the thick, acrid smoke of burning effigies, tear gas, and shattered infrastructure. A supreme leader has fallen. Power vacuums are violently ripping open. The cries of a desperate, furious populace are echoing through the very valleys where prophets once walked barefoot in the dust, declaring the judgments of the Almighty. We are witnessing a moment of unparalleled global terror, a geopolitical fracture that threatens to drag the entire world into an abyss of fire and ruin. But to understand how we arrived at this terrifying precipice, we must look far beyond the politics of the modern era. We must look to the ancient scrolls, to the covenants forged in the desert, and to the spiritual principalities that have never stopped waging war over this specific, sacred stretch of land. If you have never heard the full, deeply hidden story of the spiritual forces colliding in our world right now, stay with us. Like this video so more people can discover the eternal truths shaping our history. Subscribe so you never miss a chapter of this unfolding prophetic narrative. And now, let the story begin. Before the modern borders were drawn by politicians in distant capitals, before the flags of nations were planted in the shifting desert winds, this land was the theatre of the divine. The region we now call Iran, and the fiercely contested nations that surround it, is the very cradle of human history and biblical revelation. This is the soil where the earliest empires rose in breathtaking arrogance and fell in spectacular, prophesied ruin. This is the stage where Babylon boasted of its invincible walls and hanging gardens, only to be weighed in the balances and found wanting. This is where Persia stretched its golden scepter across the known world, where kings like Cyrus and Darius interacted with the prophets of the Most High. The dust of this land is not merely sand. It is the pulverized remnants of monuments, altars, and thrones that dared to challenge the sovereignty of heaven. To the untrained eye, the events of the modern era, the Islamic Revolution of 1979, the severing of diplomatic ties, the decades of bitter embargoes, and the relentless pursuit of nuclear ambitions, seem like mere chapters in a dry political textbook. But the spiritual reality is unfathomably deeper and infinitely more dangerous. The enmity that has grown between the West and the East is not simply about oil or geographic borders or even military supremacy. It is the modern manifestation of an ancient, unresolved spiritual fracture. The land itself holds the memory of divine covenants and profound, catastrophic rebellions. Every ruined temple, every fallen king, every war fought on this soil over the millennia has been interpreted by those who know the scriptures as a heavy, undeniable spiritual sign. The ancient world was a place where the veil between the physical and the spiritual was terrifyingly thin. And today, as missiles fly and nations rage, that veil is tearing open once again. For decades, the tension has been a slow-burning ember. But recently, the geopolitical landscape has shifted with violent, breathless suddenness. The hostility that had simmered for nearly 50 years finally boiled over into outright destruction. Joint military operations pierced the sovereignty of the Iranian borders, targeting strategic strongholds, dismantling heavily fortified facilities, and forever altering the delicate balance of power in the region. The sudden death of the supreme leader sent apocalyptic shockwaves through the very foundations of the nation, leaving a gaping void of power that was immediately, ruthlessly filled by chaotic retaliation and escalating violence. Military bases across the region were struck in the dead of night. The skies were painted with the terrifying, artificial daylight of intercepted rockets and drone swarms. And amidst this relentless barrage of external military might, something profound, deeply unsettling, and historically massive, began to happen within the hearts of the people themselves. The citizens of Iran, crushed by the suffocating weight of total economic collapse, the severe devaluation of their currency, the stripping away of their fundamental rights, and the heavy, unforgiving hand of oppression, poured into the streets by the millions. They were not merely protesting a government policy, they were crying out from the depths of their souls against a system that had entirely failed them. The government attempted to brutally suffocate the rebellion, deploying immense force and loudly claiming to the international community that the protests had been silenced. But the embers of unrest were already fanning into a roaring, uncontrollable flame. The entire world watched in breathless silence as a nation tore itself apart from the inside out, while simultaneously lashing out with deadly force at its enemies abroad. But in the absolute center of this modern chaos, a symbol emerged from the smoke that chilled the blood of anyone who understands the ancient scriptures. During the frantic, chaotic protests, amidst the screams of rebellion, the shattering of glass, and the suffocating clouds of tear gas, the people constructed and then violently destroyed a specific effigy. It was not just a symbol of political defiance, it was the deliberate resurrection of an ancient idol. They built and then burned a statue of Baal. To understand the sheer, staggering, prophetic weight of this single act, we must journey back thousands of years into the brutal, blood-soaked history of the Canaanite world. Baal was not just a myth, he was the supreme false deity of the ancient Middle East, the dark principality that seduced the nations and constantly sought to destroy the people of the covenant. He was worshipped as the storm god, the bringer of rain, lightning, and fertility. But he was also a god of ruthless, horrifying demands. The altars of Baal were drenched in the blood of human sacrifice. For centuries, the chosen prophets of Yahweh waged a desperate, spiritually exhausting war against the insidious cult of Baal. It was the prophet Elijah who stood alone on the rocky peak of Mount Carmel, facing down 450 prophets of this false god, calling down literal fire from heaven to prove to a backsliding nation that Baal was deaf, blind, and lifeless. In the second book of Kings, chapter 10, the scriptures record how the fiercely zealous warrior king Jehu eradicated the worship of this dark entity from the land of Israel. And they brought forth the images out of the house of Baal and burned them. And they brake down the image of Baal and brake down the house of Baal and made it a draught house unto this day. The destruction of Baal is one of the most violent, definitive acts of spiritual warfare recorded in the ancient texts. For thousands of years, the physical statues of Baal have been nothing but dust scattered to the desert winds. Yet in the streets of a modern 21st century nation, his name and image were invoked, constructed, and consumed by fire once more. The protesters, driven by a furious political ideology, attached the Star of David and the image of an American president to this idol, screaming for the death of their enemies as the flames licked the darkened sky. In their conscious minds, they were burning the ultimate embodiment of Western evil. They have long passionately classified the United States as the Great Satan and Israel as the Little Satan, and the burning of this effigy was meant to be a highly visible, theatrical display of their political hatred to unite their populace. But the spiritual irony, the devastating hidden layer of this moment, is absolutely staggering. In their desperate attempt to curse their modern political enemies, they unknowingly reached back into the abyss of history and invoked the very ancient symbol of ultimate spiritual corruption, demonic rebellion, and idolatry. They tapped directly into a profound biblical narrative of purification and divine destruction. For the believer watching these chaotic events unfold on a screen, this is not merely a political statement or a cultural protest. It is a profound, terrifying spiritual metaphor manifesting in the physical realm. It is a blazing signal that the ancient principalities and powers, the dark, unseen forces that governed the idolatrous empires of the past, are still fiercely, relentlessly active in the world today. They are manipulating the minds of nations, stirring up the ancient hatreds, and driving the empires of the earth toward a final, cataclysmic confrontation. The name of the idol may have been used as a political prop, but the spirit behind it is ancient, awake, and actively preparing the world for war. As the thick, black smoke clears from the burning idols and the shattered military bases, the ancient whispers of prophecy begin to grow into a deafening, unavoidable roar. Are these the definitive signs of the end of the age? Many who dedicate their lives to studying the Scriptures point immediately to the breathless discourse of Jesus Christ on the Mount of Olives. In the 24th chapter of the Gospel of Matthew, the disciples sat with Jesus on the dusty slopes, overlooking the magnificent gleaming stones of the Second Temple. They asked him plainly, "Tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world?" Jesus did not answer them with dates or times, but with a terrifyingly accurate description of the days we are living in right now. He warned them of false saviors. He spoke of nation rising against nation and kingdom against kingdom. He warned of famines, pestilences, and massive earthquakes shaking various places across the globe. All these, he declared with divine authority, are the beginning of sorrows. The escalating war in the Middle East, the daily rumors of greater devastation, the leaders of the world standing at podiums promising waves of unprecedented, overwhelming force, these are exactly the birth pains of a dying age that Christ described. When a modern political leader declares that the great wave has not yet hit, the rhetoric echoes with horrifying precision the ominous, thunderous warnings of the Book of Revelation. The seals are being loosened by the Lamb. The angelic trumpets are being raised to the lips of the heavenly host. The entire world, through its chaos, its hatred, and its fear, is being perfectly, terrifyingly aligned for the arrival of the final, great deception. The Apostle John, writing in his first epistle, warned the fragile early church of the ultimate threat looming on the horizon of history. "Little children, it is the last time, and as ye have heard that Antichrist shall come, even now are there many Antichrists, whereby we know that it is the last time." The chaos we are witnessing in the Middle East today, the sudden void of leadership, the utter desperation of the impoverished masses, the constant suffocating threat of a global nuclear war, is the exact, highly fertilized soil required for the rise of the ultimate deceiver. The Antichrist will not emerge onto the world stage as a terrifying monster with horns, breathing fire. If he did, the world would unite to destroy him. Instead, he will rise as a brilliantly charismatic savior. He will step into a world that is fractured by endless wars, paralyzed by economic terror, and suffocating under the weight of political collapse. He will offer elegant, seemingly miraculous solutions to the insurmountable, blood-soaked crises of the Middle East. He will forge a covenant of peace that the greatest diplomats of history could never achieve, captivating the minds and hearts of a desperate, exhausted global population. He will be hailed as the great unifier, the man of peace who finally solved the puzzle of the ancient lands. But this peace will be a horrific illusion, a temporary, deceptive stillness before the most horrifying storm the earth has ever endured. The destruction of the modern idols, the violent shaking of the nations, the economic collapse, and the wars and rumors of wars. It is all, every single piece of it, clearing the stage for his dark, temporary reign. We must understand the deep, hidden layer of what it means when an ancient idol is paraded in a modern street. The word Baal in the ancient Semitic languages literally translates to owner or master. When a nation or a people furiously burn the symbol of Baal, yet fundamentally reject the sovereignty of the one true God, Yahweh, they are not actually finding freedom. They are simply trading one master for another. They are sweeping the house clean only to leave it empty, inviting 7 demons more wicked than the first to enter and take up residence. The spiritual blindness of the modern era is profound. We have advanced in technology. We can split the atom and send fire from the sky with the push of a button. But spiritually, the nations are exactly where they were 3,000 years ago, dancing around the fires of their own making, worshipping the works of their own hands, and crying out to gods that cannot save them. The use of the Star of David, the ancient symbol of God's chosen people, the lineage through which the Messiah came, as an object to be burned and cursed, reveals the deep, venomous, supernatural hatred that animates this conflict. This is not just a disagreement over borders or foreign policy. This is the ancient, roaring hatred of the serpent against the seed of the woman. It is the continuation of the war that began in the Garden of Eden, played out on the global stage with ballistic missiles and uranium enrichment. The war we see escalating today between these global powers is just the beginning of the sorrows. The history of this ancient land is repeating itself in a terrifying cycle, but it is not an endless loop. It is a spiral, building rapidly toward a final, absolute, and unavoidable crescendo. The prophecies clearly declare that this present age will not end in a peaceful political treaty signed on a polished wooden desk. It will not end with humanity evolving into a state of enlightened harmony. It will end in fire, judgment, and the undeniable revelation of divine glory. The scriptures promise a day, fast approaching, when the skies themselves will be rolled back like a massive cosmic scroll. In Matthew chapter 24, verses 30 and 31, the ultimate, victorious promise of history is declared with shattering clarity. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. The hostilities of arrogant men, the boasting of massive empires, the building of weapons of mass destruction, the burning of false gods in the dusty streets, all of it, every single rebellion of mankind, will be instantly, permanently silenced by the blinding, overwhelming glory of the returning King of Kings. The unprecedented chaos currently engulfing the Middle East, the shifting of powers, the wars and the violent protests, are a harsh, undeniable, and merciful reminder that the Word of God does not return void. Not one single letter of the ancient prophecies will fail to come to pass. The ancient stories recorded in the leather scrolls are not religious myths designed to comfort the weak. They are the exact, unerring blueprints of human destiny. The shadows of Baal may still dance in the fires of human rebellion, and the nations may rage against the sovereignty of God, but the true light of the world is approaching rapidly. The birth pains are getting closer together, and they are increasing in intensity. We are living in the absolute twilight of human history, privileged and terrified to be watching the final, massive pieces of a divine, eternal puzzle lock perfectly into place. The stage is set. The actors are in their positions. The final act is about to begin. The truth of what is happening in our world today is far greater than what the daily news can report. The physical wars are merely the echoes of the spiritual war raging above us. If this story, this deep dive into the prophetic reality of our times, opened something inside of you, do not let it end here. Share it with someone who desperately needs to encounter these ancient, unshakable truths today. The world is sleepwalking into the apocalypse, and every like and share carries this vital history further, sounding the alarm to a generation that needs to wake up. Subscribe to this channel so you are present when we tell the next crucial chapter of this unfolding narrative. The stories of prophecy are far from over. The days ahead will require immense faith. But take heart. The final victory has already been written in the blood of the Lamb. Until next time.